All right. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you're calling in from. Thank you so very much for taking the time to join our Novisto webinar on navigating the new greenhouse gas protocol. We're going to wait a couple minutes as we allow for more registrants to join, but you should be seeing a poll on your screen right now. Somewhat of an icebreaker. We'd love to know in your ESG program, in your carbon management program, what's your superpower? You should be able to select, and we'll have some results coming up. Philip, you've been on the greenhouse gas journey for a while. What's your ESG superpower when it comes to let's hone in specifically on scope three.
Um, I think it probably is finding missing data.
Yeah, you're the Sherlock Holmes of finding missing
I
scope three
I
data.
love looking at data.
I absolutely hate it. So I'm glad I'm glad you enjoy it. Daniel, what's your superpower?
I have to be boring and say same as Philip. Uh, Big love for
Ah.
data as well.
I've been outnumbered by the data folks, but I'll take it. I'll take it. I'm glad there are people like you all who enjoy working in the rows and the spreadsheets and finding those missing data points, because there are people like me who do not. Kate, what results do we have coming in so far? Let's see. Oh, yeah. I love the looking calm during reporting season. That is a skill because you have to look calm when you're reporting up to C-suite and the execs. You have to look calm to your team, who is probably in the weeds of data collection. So we're seeing 40% of people, their superpower is looking calm during reporting season. I endorse that message. Thanks so very much for participating. We're 2 minutes in. As I mentioned, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're dialing in from. Thank you so very much for taking the time to join our webinar. We're very, very appreciative of we know everyone has these very busy calendars and schedules, so we're very, very appreciative of people taking the time to join. So today's webinar is all about navigating the new greenhouse gas protocol. We know there are some changes coming to scope 3 accounting. We've brought two of our greenhouse gas SMEs, and I don't just mean that they know the greenhouse gas protocol like the back of their hand, but they also worked with many of our clients in developing their greenhouse gas inventory. So I'd like to introduce Daniel Roos. He's one of our solutions engineers here at Novisto, and he's also part of our partnership program, helping to navigate the partner landscape. And also Philip Prinstich, who is the founding footprint lead of the Novisto Carbon platform. So they're going to walk you through the bulk of today's session. We do have dedicated time for Q&A at the end, so feel free to drop any questions or comments that you have within the chat. I'll keep my eye on it as well. And this session is being recorded and will be shared along with the presentation at the end. So, Philip, I'm going to pass you to kick us off.
Great, thanks, Rajiv. So, yeah, I mean, we are talking about scope three, uh, the scope three review, which is obviously part of an overall refresh of the Greenhouse Gas Protocol corporate accounting suite. So, I think it's worth just setting the context a bit. So the Greenhouse Gas Protocol has been around for a while, and has not been revised pretty much since all the different elements have been published. So the original standard was first or last revised in 2004. And even the Scope 3 is kind of going back 15 years now. The original standard is based on a voluntary best effort approach, which in the current context is not really fit for purpose anymore, where the regulatory framework demands much greater consistency and comparability. Um, so on top of that, we also have seen exponential growth in the actual use of the standards, and most recently also the Greenhouse Gas Protocol and ISO have announced that they were harmonizing the standards. There is an equivalent ISO standard 14064 Part 1, which, to be fair, is used much less than greenhouse gas protocol. But mentioning the regulatory landscape, the regulation is a key driver. So looking at the long-standing voluntary schemes such as CDP and SBTI have been using the greenhouse gas protocol as their basis for a while, and that is now increasingly being joined by regulatory frameworks such as ISSB's IFRS S2 standard, which is being widely adopted around the world as the basis for regulatory reporting, including the UK and Canada. The EU's Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive is taking a slightly different approach with ESRS and E1 being the carbon element of that. But that is very much aligned with IFRS as well. So they are broadly compatible. There has been a recent review of ESRS which stopped just short of fully aligning with IFRS. To complete the sort of geographic coverage of greenhouse gas protocol is the foundation of regulatory reporting. We look to the states where obviously there have been well-documented recent headwinds, but nevertheless, the California's climate disclosure laws will still have a significant impact on US companies as well. So we can see that greenhouse gas protocol really sits at the foundation of all of these frameworks. So moving on to the Scope 3 review timeline specifically, you can see that this is a process that was kicked off quite a while ago, and the update that I'm talking about today covers phase 1 of a 2-phase process, and despite that, we are well past the halfway point in the process. Phase 2 is already underway, and a public consultation on the whole package of proposed changes is due in Q4 of this year. The final publication then, the publication date in 2027 is not yet provided because it will depend not only on the feedback from the public consultation, but also the completion of the corporate and Scope 2 standard reviews, because they will all be released together as one update. So the Scope 3 review phase 1, as I mentioned, it has been sort of updated, an update has been provided, and that was broken down into 3 thematic series. The update provided emphasizes that the proposals are subject to change and will not be finalized until sort of certainly post public consultation, but the direction of travel is nevertheless quite clear and enables companies to take general steps to prepare without committing to the detailed aspects of the proposals. So looking at Series A, the direction of travel in this particular series is very clearly moving towards greater accountability regarding data quality. Varying data quality, for example, between spend-based procurement all the way to very supplier-specific, quantity-based emission factors is a major barrier to comparability between footprints, and even over time within the same organization. At the same at the same time, whilst recognizing data quality as a key issue, these proposals still recognize the limitations of data availability, and therefore they are looking at implementing a transparency of data quality alongside a continuous improvement requirement. So the data that is to be presented will be broken down depending on the level of data quality. Data quality is not being measured through a time-consuming and subjective data quality matrix, as has been the case previously, but instead by breaking down the emissions in accordance with the quality of the activity data and emission factors. This is a requirement that the carbon accounting software is particularly suited to handle over spreadsheet approaches. So looking at Series B, the boundary setting, the next series, the theme of greater consistency and quality continues here, with all relevant Scope 3 categories having to be reported. So it's no longer a pick and choose. There is still a up to 5% materiality threshold that can be excluded. But in order to exclude it, these emissions have to be justified through quantification. So once you've quantified it, you may as well report it. The one big change, sort of headline grabbing change, I guess, is the proposed new category 16, which will remove a significant source of ambiguity and inconsistency around facilitated emissions. There have always been a few areas where it's not been entirely clear as to whether and where these activities should be reported. I think category 16 certainly covers that. And it is slightly tentative in the sense that the reporting for category 16 is optional, and no explicit calculation guidance will be given within the standard or the subsequent guidance. But it can be expected that this is only sort of an initial step, and then subsequent guidance will eventually follow based on experience post-implementation, as I think we have seen with category 15, for example, in the past. So then Series C focuses on investments in particular, and this is where sort of the further guidance really comes in, and clarification. So category 15 was in a similar position to where the new category 16 is going to find itself, with fairly vague requirements and guidance in the original Scope 3 standard, which was subsequently then backfilled by other bodies such as PCAF to try and get some consistency across different sectors, industry sectors, and particularly, obviously, the financial sector. So this Series C is largely a tidying up effort, bringing in a lot of the guidance that has already been available externally, but obviously some of the elements that PCAF handled will move out of category 15 into the new category 16. But again, we see in this series a move towards more comprehensive reporting, higher quality, and greater consistency. So it's worth noting that the applicability of category 15 to all companies, not just financial institutions, is specifically called out in this work stream. Although this is not really a change, that was always the case, but is something that has often been neglected in practice. So it's good to see that being emphasized still. So this, as I mentioned, is phase one of a sort of two-phase approach. So phase two actually already kicked off in August last year, and although it is looking at category-specific changes across the board, the focus of phase two is very much on downstream categories, so categories 10 and 11 for processing and use of sold products, as well as the different aspects of end of life of sold products. And it is really too early, far too early to come to any conclusions around that. There is still a lot of discussion going on in this phase. So just to recap the key highlights from phase one, the keywords are quality, consistency, and comparability, with reporting of all relevant scope 3 categories required, more granular reporting with disaggregation based on data quality, mandatory versus optional emissions to be reported separately, and subcategory reporting for categories 15 and 16 in particular. The new category 16, of course, is a major change that companies will have to bring in or consider how it is applicable to them in terms of facilitated emissions. And then we have better alignment with other reporting frameworks, obviously ISO as well, and greater emphasis on data quality, transparency, with a drive to greater consistency. So what are the practical implications of this? The update provided is only partial and the changes are not finalized. This is always emphasized in their documentation, but the direction of travel is very clear. It's more comprehensive, granular reporting, which will require some time to implement for companies to get their systems in order, etc. So early planning and implementation of a carbon accounting platform that already has the right foundations and can adapt to the new requirements will go a long way to meeting this challenge. So with that, I think I'll hand over to Daniel.
Thanks, Philip. That was super insightful. And as you said, I think the direction of travel for the greenhouse gas protocol is very clear. And to be honest, some of those upcoming requirements, like the 5% exclusion threshold, probably look pretty daunting on paper to a lot of people who are currently reviewing that or on this call. So my name is Daniel. I am one of the solutions engineers here at Novisto. And my goal for the next part of the webinar is to take those onerous changes that Philip was talking about and show you how we're actually helping our customers manage their footprint today on our platform. So we'll focus on how a modern carbon accounting system needs to handle that increased granularity in Scope 3, so that when those proposed changes do come into effect, our customers aren't going to be starting from scratch. And before we jump into the platform itself, I just want to give a bit of context on Novisto Carbon first. And for those of you who are new to us, our core focus has always been on helping organizations extract value from their sustainability data. And because of that, we had quite a unique vantage point. We saw firsthand where traditional carbon calculators were falling short and what teams were struggling with across the board. So this led us to extensively evaluate the market and look for a tool that was strong enough to handle that next level of data rigor that we know is going to be required for carbon accounting, not just today, but also as we look forward. And I think Philip's summary of the upcoming changes to the protocol is a great example of that. And that search is what ultimately brought us together with a solution called Minimum, a team that Philip was part of, where we ended up partnering with them for about 3 years before we ultimately acquired the technology into the Novisto ecosystem completely in just a couple of months ago. And we've spent those last couple of years focusing on one major goal, really, which was to integrate carbon accounting directly into the broader ESG reporting workflow. And the reason we wanted to do this is because we didn't want our customers to have their carbon data to be sitting in a disconnected silo from their other ESG and sustainability data points. And because we had that long-term partnership already in place, by the time we officially joined forces as one company, we already had many mutual customers using our combined solution, both for ESG reporting and for carbon accounting. So what you're about to see in the next bit here is going to be a proven integrated system where that was built to handle the exact direction of travel that we're seeing in the greenhouse gas portfolio today, moving away from high-level estimates into audit-ready granular Scope 3 data. And as we go through the demo, I'm going to focus on 4 key pillars that define our approach here. The first one's increased flexibility and automation for data collection. One of our key focuses here is eliminating the manual data manipulation that usually eats up our customers' time. Second one's audit readiness by design. The tool that we have isn't just a calculator. We're proud of our audit capabilities that make the assurance process both faster and more cost-effective. And the third one, a comprehensive Scope 3 capabilities. We've built a very specific suite to help our customers identify hotspots and collaborate directly with their value chain to improve their Scope 3 data quality. And lastly, a future-proof data model. So our methodologies are designed to evolve with our customers. We work with them where they quite often start with just basic estimates and move to sophisticated, high-precision data as their reporting matures. So very much in line with the trend that we're seeing with the proposed greenhouse gas protocol changes that Philip has presented. So I think we've already got a sneak peek there on the demo itself. But let's have a look at how we actually handle this in our platform today. This is the main view of the Novisto Carbon solution. And right away, we get a clear view of where our footprint stands across scopes 1, 2, and 3. And I find this progress view really important because, as we just discussed, the new standard is moving away from just best guesses. Our customers need to know exactly how much of the footprint is already calculated, what's not still finished, and also then to be able to dive down and interrogate the data quality of their footprint today and how it can be improved in order to be able to take action on that data. So moving on, as I mentioned, the platform handles everything across scopes 1, 2, and 3. But for today, I really want to focus on our Scope 3 capabilities in line with the theme of the webinar. And one of the biggest challenges that we often hear from our customers is being able to show how they actually arrived at their calculated emissions. And you can see here that we support a range of different calculation methodologies, even though what you see here is just a small sample of what we do support. And when our customers use Novisto Carbon, we don't lock them into one way of doing their footprint. And one of our key strengths here is flexibility of the data model in order to support our customers based on what inputs they have access to today. So what that means is that many of our customers might start with a spend-based approach, that hotspot approach that Philip was mentioning before, and as part of estimating the footprint. And that's a great starting point. But as their reporting matures, we also allow them to shift towards more activity-based data, or even down to product-specific information that can be gathered straight from the suppliers. And we have experience of working with many organizations, meeting them where they are and evolving those footprint methodologies. And you can always start with what you have today, but we also provide our customers with a clear path to that high quality and audit ready data that the greenhouse gas protocol is starting to require also for scope 3. And moving on to one of the other core principles that I mentioned before, data ingestion. And as I said, one of the biggest hurdles we hear from sustainability teams is that the data, especially for scope 3, is generally just a mess. It can be scattered across the company and also from outside the company, different formats, different systems. And the reality is that it's not just going to be sitting in one place and be ready to be calculated straight away. Initially, it could come as massive files from an SAP or an Oracle. It could be a spreadsheet from a logistics provider, tracking tons of cargo. Or it might be travel data or flight data from a system like Concur that breaks down all of the different travels and itineraries your team took last year. And our approach with Novisto is to meet our customers where they are. So they don't have to spend weeks manually reformatting those original files, and then tweak them into fitting a specific format or a specific template. We can take those raw inputs, and we have experience in mapping those raw input files wherever they're coming from, automatically based on a methodology that we agree upon with our customers, all the way from emission factors and then to calculation of the footprint. And then moving on from that, looking at those Series A changes that Philip highlighted earlier, especially the new requirement to disaggregate emissions by data type, we have a specific supplier engagement suite that we can leverage in this case here. And what we are looking at here is we're looking at a way for our customers to capture primary data directly from the source. So within the platform, our customers launch customized surveys to gather information straight from the suppliers. And what we do is we help companies move away from those generic industry averages that you might want to start with. And then as the reporting matures, they can move to more granular product level data for the specific items they're actually purchasing. And this directly addresses that focus on continuous quality improvement for scope 3, which was another change that Philip was talking about before, which I'll have a look at in a second here when we look at the analytics that we can provide to and all of the information around the data and the quality that we also track for our customers. So if we have a look at that, in this view here on the next little video here, we can actually visualize the level of estimation across our customers' entire footprint. So instead of just seeing a final number, you're going to be seeing the health of your data as well. Because what we do is we can apply quality indicators that we tag to each data point so that you know exactly what is a high confidence primary source coming directly from a supplier, for example, versus what's still a broader estimate. And we're very flexible here, so we can build in different levels of data quality indicators that make sense for the customer that we're working with. And what this really allows you to do, and we can look at this here in this visual as well, is then drill down into your supply chain to pinpoint exactly where your data, first of all, is weakest, but then also be informed about where in your supply chain you could focus on in order to have the highest impact. And by allowing our customers to retrieve more of that high quality data that they need to do this, they're going to be more equipped to have those conversations with their suppliers directly. And then finally, to wrap things up, I also want to talk about that Series C that Philip was mentioning about category 15 specifically. And as he highlighted before, the bar for reporting is being raised here, and I guess being more clear about that this does no longer just apply to financial institutions. So if you work for a company that holds significant investments, the proposed changes to the protocol that we looked at make it clear that these emissions will now be required to be disclosed for corporates as well. And we already have customers that are calculating category 15 on our platform today using a PCAF aligned methodology, which, to Philip's point before, is the gold standard that we have today, and that's being harmonized with the greenhouse gas protocol. And what it does, it allows the specific formulas, data quality scores that is specific to investments, to allow the numbers to be consistent and, very importantly, comparable across the market between companies. And if you look at the analytics on the screen, you can see how we bring that data to life here. We allow our customers to see their carbon intensity across different investments and investment types. And then also in that disaggregated format that Philip was referring to earlier, that's going to be required. And I would say the ultimate goal here for category 15, but also category 16, which obviously is also going to be implemented and used on our system, is that while neither of these might be mandatory for corporates today, the direction here is moving towards full transparency in a similar way to the rest of the categories in scope 3. And our customers that already do adopt that PCAF aligned calculation methodology are making sure that when it is a requirement and when those reporting deadlines do hit, the investment data that they need to report on is already robust, it's verified, and in that PCAF aligned methodology that will be required under the greenhouse gas protocol itself once those changes come into effect. And that's it for the overview of the platform and the demo here. So I'll be handing back over to Rajiv, who's going over a couple of different case studies of customers that are using the Novisto platform too.
Thank you so very much, Philip and Daniel. So we've now moved from presenting some of the changes, some of the proposed changes coming within scope 3 to how we are actually preparing our customers for that journey. But for us, as both Philip and Daniel mentioned, this is not new for us here at Novisto. We've been on the carbon accounting, carbon management journey for a long time, helping some very large organizations around the world manage the carbon inventory within their corporate footprint and beyond. So I'm going to share a couple of quick customer stories. The first one I want to dive into is how we were able to help, and this ties into one of the questions that I see coming into the chat, how we were able to help automate the calculation of Phoenix's carbon footprint and expand the capacity of the ESG team. So for this particular customer, carbon accounting was just one part of their broader sustainability or ESG program. That include producing an annual sustainability report that was CSRD and GRI aligned. And of course, with that came all the challenges in ensuring high data quality, freeing up time of the team so that they're not just trapped in data collection and calculation. And of course, making sure that the end result that they were disclosing was accurate, auditable, and transparent. So leveraging our Novisto Carbon platform, they were able to calculate their carbon footprint across all activities within the business, covering more than 325 sites, which was quite a task ahead of them. They were able to dive deeper into their scope 3 analysis, and this was to ensure and increase the completeness of the reporting, because we all know scope 3 in itself is quite extensive, and there are many hidden and blind spots, hidden areas and blind spots within the inventory, and we were able to shed light on the full scope 3 inventory. And that obviously led to them publishing a CSRD aligned report that had a clear audit trail, and they were able to stand by the data, not just their carbon data, but the overall sustainability data that was published within the report. So some of the benefits that Daniel was mentioning through the platform around the transparency, completeness, accuracy of the data sets, we were able to realize those benefits for Phoenix. The next customer, and we were asked a very specific question in the chat about comparing ourselves to other vendors in the market. And in many cases, we are seeing customers leaving other vendors in the market and coming directly to the Novisto Carbon platform. And for a few different reasons. For this particular customer that you're seeing on screen, they had quite complicated data collection processes that they were looking to streamline across their different business units. And each of the business units had a slightly different approach to data collection. They were looking for a tool to help standardize and streamline without obviously changing or upsetting the business's daily operations. And in this specific case, they were looking at reports that were aligned to a variety of standards and requirements. So they had GRI, they had ISSB, they were looking at the industry-specific standards within SASB, they were looking at disclosure against CDP and other disclosures. And that meant the number of data points, the way that they had to disclose and prepare the data was obviously changing requirement to requirement. Given the Scope 3 element, we had to engage stakeholders throughout the value chain that included both their customers and suppliers. So it was a comprehensive Scope 3 analysis, and the outputs and the benefits that they realized is that we were able to standardize their data collection, produce a greenhouse gas inventory that contained calculations across all their business units. And in the end, we were able to reduce the amount of time that it took them before implementing Novisto Carbon, that it took them to prepare the disclosures for their different stakeholders. So we have many other success stories similar to these two that I shared with you on customers realizing the benefits of implementing technology, specifically our Novisto Carbon solution. I know we're at time. Kate, thank you so very much for flipping us through the deck. We do have a few minutes to take some questions. For the questions that we don't get to answer live, just in the interest of time, we are going to provide written responses. So don't worry, we will answer every single question. Philip, I want to pose the first question to you because we had two of them come in and they were along the lines of defining what is facilitated emissions. Can you shed some light on what we mean by facilitated emissions?
Yeah, sure. So facilitated emissions are really emissions where an organization has a hand in exactly that, facilitating an activity without being directly involved in the sort of value chain. So the key examples of that are insurance, which obviously PCAF covered and is one of the areas that's moving out of category 15 into category 16. But insurance essentially enables activities to take place by providing sort of these guarantees. Licensing is another area that falls under facilitation, and transport brokerage, for example, is one that we have come across with customers where a broker helps a business to find logistics companies, etc., but they don't either own the freight that is being moved or the vehicles that are moving the freight. Nevertheless, they have a hand in this process. So that's facilitated emissions.
Appreciate it. And if you do have any follow-up questions, we can always take the conversation offline. One more question. This one is a bit mathematical. Philip, would you be able to please clarify the denominator for the 5% calculation? Would it be as a total of all Scope 3?
Yes, so this is yes, in fact, the total Scope 3, the required Scope 3 emissions. So again, there is still within Scope 3, there is still some emissions that are optional to be reported. Category 16 being the case in point, but of those category or Scope 3 emissions that are required, that's the denominator.
Thank you. Daniel, I want to punt one your way. I mean, what would be a webinar in 2026 without possibly the most used acronym in the tech space right now, and that's AI. So we got a question. Is Novisto looking to integrate AI into the platform? And I know the question comes from a place of, have we done it as yet, or are we planning to do it? The good news is we have done it, and we are continuing to build on it. Daniel, would you like to shed some light on how we're working with AI?
Yeah, absolutely. And I always love getting this question because, I think the way that we designed our platform originally was very much with, as I was alluding to in the presentation before, with data governance and structure of data, which if we look at a lot of platforms that are more legacy, they might not have been designed in the best way to actually be able to surface a lot of the information using AI. So already today, our customers can surface insights in relation to things like what their peers are doing using AI. And we have multiple different tools in different ways, like chatbots, AI that helps our customers automate the data ingestion onto the platform, which I was alluding to before as well, in that we were automating the ability to bring in data at scale into the platform. We look at data for outlier management. We have AI that can help with parts of report drafting if we look at further downstream for ESG reporting. And there's a lot of other tools which we leverage, different tools that you might not necessarily associate with AI if you think about what just a ChatGPT or a Claude interface is. So it's definitely very much our focus, and has been for many years, and more increasingly so in the last couple of years too.
So I appreciate it. And that was a good shout out. We've actually tested our AI, our chatbots, our agents against some of the market available models responses, right? Because they were all contextual, they all applied to greenhouse gas accounting and ESG reporting. So we actually saw higher percent accuracy with our AI models compared to the publicly available models. We have time for one more question. Philip, I'd like to bring you in here because it's a question we get all the time. Not just with these scope 3 changes, it's around our emission factor library. Can you talk a little bit about the factors that we have built into the carbon platform, where they come from, the extent of the library, and where we might be able to add in factors pending these changes with scope 3?
Sure, yeah. So we have a very extensive library of emission factors. There is a sort of base set that we kind of reference all the time, and essentially that consists of DEFRA, the UK government set for most standard emission factors in terms of fuels, etc., augmented with regional variations, so US EPA, the Canadian emission factors, Australian emission factors, but also IEA for electricity, EcoInvent for embodied emissions, and a couple of EIO sets that we can use. We've got OpenSeed and TASA EFX. On top of that, we can then adjust and add any customer-specific emission factors. So any particular niche regionally published emission factor sets that we don't have as sort of default across the board, we can add in, or also supplier-specific emission factors, etc., can be added into the platform as well.
Brilliant, thank you. You've twisted my arm, Philip. We're going to do one more, if that's okay. Looking forward, the best way to wrap up a webinar is talk about what's coming. Looking forward, we know that these updates are probably going to be published in 2027. How long will organizations have to come into compliance with the changes?
Yeah, I guess it depends to some extent when in FY27 this is going to be published. But just to look at the most recent standard that was published by Greenhouse Gas Protocol, the Land Sector Removal Standard, was published in January this year, and it will come into force January 2027. So almost a year, and I think it would be reasonable to expect a similar time frame for these changes to come into effect.
Thank you so much. We've made it to time. I know we have many other questions in the Q&A that we weren't able to get to, but we will provide written responses to them to our attendees. Thank you so very much for carving out the time in your very busy schedules to join our webinar on the changes coming with Scope 3 and how you can navigate those. Daniel, Philip, thank you so very much for sharing insights. I know we can have an in-depth follow-up conversation for hours on this topic, so I do invite our registrants and attendees, please feel free to reach out if you have any questions to the email address that you're seeing on screen right now, and we'd be more than happy to set up some of those sessions. As mentioned at the beginning, the session was recorded and will be sent out with the slides, and we will provide written responses to the unanswered questions. Thanks so very much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.